everyone. Welcome to the I Will Not Be Ignored podcast. I'm excited to join you today with my two co-hosts. We have Cleo, Jenny. Welcome, everyone, to this platform where we can talk about things that are uncomfortable, things that may be vulnerable, things that may be not something that everyone talks about publicly, but we all share and go through those experiences. For today, we wanted to talk about stepping outside your comfort zone. Really excited to dig into this with these ladies. So let's get started.
Really excited to kick this off. And I guess I'll start in terms of my experience getting outside of the comfort zone. For me, it was really moving to another area of the country. So just to give you some background, pretty much a New Yorker, born and bred, grew up in Queens for the most part, went to high school in the New Jersey suburbs about half an hour away, even went to college in the city and was always very proud of being a New Yorker. I always thought that I was a tough chick, that I had the edge over everyone else, that I was street smart, that I was badass, people were envious of me. Certainly, I've learned that when you become arrogant, life humbles you. Life presents you with challenges. Life slaps you down. And certainly
it reminds you where you're at.
That's right. To sit your ass back down, that you are not better than everyone else. So really spent my entire life, never thought that I would leave. But then certain series of instances happened during my last year in the city where, speaking of inner voice, my inner voice started to speak louder and louder about perhaps having a change of scenery would be very good for me in terms of just opening up another chapter of my life, changing my environment. So I started.
I have a question for you, Jenny.
Go for it.
I have a question. Now, was it something you've always been in top of your mind, like, I'm a New Yorker, I'm staying in New York, or was just like life happened, unfolded, and it just never had an opportunity for it?
That's a great question. So I'll start that off by saying I just started to have more and more of a curiosity and desire to leave and to have a change of environment. And I just remember one day hanging out with a dear friend of mine in the city, and he's originally from California, and just at dinner, just asking him, I wonder what it would be like if I moved to California. Like, what's it like over there? Would you ever move back? And I've noticed this tendency when people swap coasts, they tend not to want to swap back. There's a reason why they made that change. Particularly, I think for West Coast people who move to New York, they tend to love it because it's so different. And it's kind of a very aspirational place to move to that they can't imagine leaving. The hustle and bustle. I also met a lot of East Coast people here who are like, I'll never go back to New York or wherever he or she came from. So very interesting phenomenon to start off with. But back to your original question. I started to have these thoughts that became stronger and stronger about leaving. On top of that, at that point of my life, a lot of things started to go wrong. You know when life tests you? I think
was it just like nothing made sense anymore? Was it like
nothing made sense to everyone? Yes. Everything that I'm doing, I thought would pan out, was not panning out. This was also the time where, referring back to a previous podcast, I started having problems with friends. The job that I had at the time, which I thought was a dream job, just really started to crumble. Things weren't working out there. I was incredibly unhappy. I was depressed. I really didn't see a future for myself in New York City anymore. You know, your gut just tells you it's time for a change.
Yeah.
And life has a weird way of presenting you with opportunities when you least expect it. So that job that I was mentioning was coming to an end, not only for me, but for my entire department. And long story short, everyone saw the writing on the wall. So I passed my resume off to a vendor we hired to manage our social media. She was bi-coastal. And she kindly started distributing my resume to her contacts because we had a great working relationship. And I didn't really hear anything from it for probably a few months until one day I received this email out of the blue saying that he received my resume and that he would really love to talk to me about a position. So I was frantic in terms of my job search, obviously just looking in the New York area, and then didn't really have any information about the position. Finally got on the phone with him and we're talking about it. I could tell he was getting very excited by our conversation. He started asking me more and more questions about, obviously, what I was looking for. He really thought that it would be a great fit. And then out of the blue, he was like, would you be willing to relocate? And I was like, where? Where would you like me to relocate to? And he was like, well, the headquarters is in Australia, and we would really ideally like someone in the Los Angeles area so that they can fly direct to the headquarters. Because from New York, it would be like a 20-plus hour flight, and there is no direct flight from New York. And also there would be a better overlap in terms of the difference in time zone. So because I have no other prospects, I just said, all right, yes. I mean, it's essentially everything that I wanted presented to me when I least expected it, including the relocation.
Did you have hesitation, or was it like, boom, yes, this makes sense? Like, where was the uncomfortable moment?
Well, it was fear. I mean, I've never really left the area to live. And also it came so suddenly. It's not like, well, I'm really aiming to make this change and I'm doing all of these things. It was in the back of my mind, but I never really thought it would become a reality.
Was it a very quick, like, you need to make a decision, or you had time to think it through at the minute, like, they asked you?
Well, when he asked me, will I be willing to relocate, my assumption was that that was like the make or break factor for the job. Okay. So I just said yes.
Did you care?
Was there moments of regret, like after you're like, I'm doing this, like maybe I made a mistake, or you're like, I bought into it, I'm doing this?
Well, I really didn't have any other options at that point. And long story short, everything fell into place very fast.
Wow.
So
that's a lot to absorb, like in a very quick time.
Yes. It all just fell into place. It all just kind of happened. Boom, 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 boom. And the next thing you know, I was on a plane.
Did they help out with relocation? Did they help out with finding a place? Like, did you have support doing this, or is it completely like on your own and figuring it out?
Great question. They paid for everything.
Oh, wow. So literally like worked out.
Yes, literally worked out. Literally. So I considered myself very lucky and was obviously scared, but very excited. And then here's one thing that they did not tell me, and which also I did not understand because I wasn't very deeply familiar with the Los Angeles area. Where the office was, it was not a desirable location. So
only locals would know. So.
Right. So coming from New York, where a lot of the offices are in Midtown or like Gramercy or Financial District, imagine if you were interviewing for a job and they said to you, well, our office is in the Bronx or Staten Island, what would you be thinking?
I will not go. That's an immediate no for me.
Oh, come on, Tova, you're local too. What's wrong with the Bronx or Staten Island?
Like, how the hell do I get to this place?
You have a car?
Oh.
Exactly. So when I was telling people who were more familiar with the Los Angeles area where the office was, people were like, I don't, Jenny, like, do you realize where that office is? Like, do you know that area? Like, I don't think you'll like it there. And of course, being stubborn, I said, I'm going to love it there. It's going to all work out. And, you know, they were right. And it was in a very industrial, blue-collar area where a lot of people did not want to go there. Or if they hired people, it would be very local people. I know this sounds horrible, but I'm just being very brutally honest. And
No,
I had
I
a
think
really
that's
hard
true.
I had a really hard time adjusting to that.
I just had a question. So stepping out, so your experience about stepping outside of your comfort zone, it seems like it was more of a shock, like more of a surprised shock than something that you were expected. Was that, I guess, this type, so for your stepping out of comfort zone, I guess, what would you like summarize this experience? Like, as this is something it was a lesson learned for me that I need to be careful and cautious and know all the aspects of a new job, a new offers, when I'm searching for roles, or like more of, hey, I did this, step out of my comfort zone, I moved to another state across the country, and overall I'm just really excited and happy about it.
It's actually both. I would highly, highly recommend for anyone who's ever in my situation, go to the place before you accept the offer. Really understand, visit, do your due diligence, do not do not go in blind, because you just never know. So in retrospect, that's what I would have done. That said, I am still in the Los Angeles area, so it couldn't have been that bad. So I think ultimately it was very good for me.
And before you move, like
That's
when they give you
awesome.
the offer, before you move on to like get on the plane, what did your gut tell you? Was there in a voice that you have inside of you telling you, hey Jenny, you should look into more, or hey Jenny, like just move, or hey Jenny, like do more, I'm trying to understand more?
Mm-hmm. Because everything lined up so well and they paid for everything, I just jumped on the bandwagon and knew like this is an opportunity that probably it's an opportunity of a lifetime, and I'd be silly not to say to decline. So it was definitely getting out of the comfort zone in terms of geography, but also, as I was saying, going to an area that it was, despite the fact that it was in the LA area, not really in the LA area, and having to be humble, because I have to say, I came in there with as I said earlier, a very big head, a very arrogant attitude, and I am sure I rubbed people the wrong way, and it really taught me to be very respectful of any sort of situation, that arrogance is never met well. It's do not disrespect the natives, and learn to work as a team.
What
I mean,
was
if
the
you were
biggest... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
go ahead Tova.
Cleo.
Go ahead Tova.
I was gonna say, what was the biggest adjustment for you, like from like difference in living in a city from New York to LA? What was for you personally? one of the most biggest differences that you had to adjust to?
Well, you'll laugh at this, but I did not have a driver's license before I moved
So
there.
New York of you.
So New York.
I took the test in high school, and by that time I knew I was going to college in Manhattan, so I failed, and I was just like, screw it. Why go through this?
I don't need it.
But I knew it was going to bite me in the ass, and it did, because you can't do anything, especially in an area like that, without a car. You can't go out and grab a salad or a sandwich. You can't go to the store. There's no public transportation. I actually kept it a secret for a long time because people would be like, well, why don't you just rent a car? And I'd be like, oh, well, I don't know. I'm just exploring my options. And I take Ubers to the grocery store. I take Ubers everywhere. And then finally, I hired a driving school. They would drive to my office during lunchtime, and we would just drive around the neighborhood during lunch.
My kids are doing that now as they're learning to drive.
Yeah, they would drive around the neighborhood, and then like he just dropped me back off, and people thought I was just out to lunch. But obviously, I eventually got my license and got that sorted. But that was very shocking that you needed a car to do everything.
Yeah, this is definitely a New York thing. All my friends that I met in New York does not either don't have a driver license or do not know how to drive, or if they have driver license, they just never be on the road driving.
And then they if they have to get into the car, they're all like nervous. It's like beginner drivers because it obviously involves practice and muscle memory and all of that. So
I find this kind of cute about New Yorkers.
But also, like, there are no seasons really here. And that was shocking. People are more laid back than the New York hustle and bustle. It's like a movie. It's like apples and oranges. Like, it's just so different that there's no common frame of reference, really. And also, at that time, because I was limited to not having a car or being a novice driver, like, I was pretty much like tied to that area versus like having the freedom to go to a much more like trendy place or hipper place or what have you. I mean, I eventually moved out to a much more urban environment, but that obviously took a while for everything to line up and make me feel comfortable doing so. But it's just like moving to another planet, and it actually took me like at least a year to get fully adjusted.
Yeah, I can imagine. You have to find like everything new. It's not even like you have a frame of reference. Like simple, like where's my dry cleaners? And
it's funny you mentioned dry cleaners because in my old neighborhood, like many New York neighborhoods, you get out of the subway station and it's like the grocery store, the dry cleaners, it's all there in like a 2-block radius. And I was just really shocked because of everything being spread out and the city being so sprawling that like as I mentioned before, you had to get into a car for everything. And that was very shocking.
Yeah.
Also,
I was going to say no, because then like when you calculate your schedule, like I've had this, right? How much time do I need? And so all of a sudden, when things are spread out more, it takes that much longer to get whatever you need done. You're just errands and, your day-to-day living. All of a sudden, it's now a 2-hour event versus, 30 minutes.
Exactly. And then also visiting people. Like I had some friends from New York who were already here. I had some family members. And then when I told them that I was arriving and told them what neighborhood I was based in, to my surprise, a lot of people were like, I'm not going to visit you. Like, it's just too much of a headache to fight the traffic and go there. Just point blank, matter of factly. And I was very disappointed by that. I was.
Yeah, I can imagine, because especially when you had a vision and thinking what you were going to and it wasn't, and then having the support as you acclimate and that was taken away too. It must have been really hard.
It was. But also, like, in New York, you're just constantly hustling and walking, power walking from point A to point B, and it keeps you fit. And when you take that away, I just remember feeling so sedentary, feeling very soft because I just wasn't walking. Even things like that were very surprising.
The small things that you don't even think about or take for granted, all of a sudden it's like a whole, like you said, another planet.
Exactly. But clearly something is still resonating with me because I'm still here. It's a very interesting and fascinating city because I think I finally learned to embrace the difference. And that's exciting too, right? Because I think when you're stuck in one geographical location for too long, you get tunnel vision.
And now let's put in a scenario, Jenny. If you are moving back to New York, what would you, taking some of the lessons that you learned, with this stepping out of comfort zone back to New York, if, let's hypothetically saying.
I think it's my perspective, just having a much more broader point of view in terms of challenges, accepting differences, being more patient with people, I think. I think in terms of just growing as a person, that's what I would take back. And also being very open to another relocation in the future, and that it's going to be okay, that you'll be fine, and to just really embrace those opportunities. Obviously, as I mentioned before, do your research beforehand to really understand what you're getting yourself into, but you only live once, so embrace those opportunities.
I love that. I love that pivot, when you went into how you're coming out of that. That was a great question.
Yeah. I mean, both of you have lived in other places, so you're much more experienced with that in terms of relocation and your experiences. Like, what was it like for both of you when you had to relocate?
For me, I was very excited. Going to New York, I've been in Miami for school, like since I was a kid. So moving to New York was like very exciting thing for me. And within Miami, people say like it's very diverse population, but it's probably diverse within the Hispanic culture, not diverse. There's no diversity across like all kinds of race. So moving to New York is definitely more of my alley. There is different type of cuisines, type of culture that's embraced in New York. So that was a more of like exciting move for me than staying in Miami.
For me, I couldn't wait to leave. So I don't know if you guys know this, but I grew up in an ultra Orthodox house. And that wasn't something I identified with from a very young age. And growing up in a very religious home that restricted everything I did, I'm talking about what I could wear, what I could eat, how I speak, who I can speak to, how I invest my time, with whom I invest my time. Everything was dictated. And it just didn't resonate with me. It was something that I just did not see as the truth for me. So when I finally became an adult, I was ready to leave. I want to find myself, find my life, reset, because this isn't a life for me. So I've moved around a lot. I lived in other countries, part of that journey, figuring what that was for me.
I want to hear more about it, Tova. Is that your, I think this is a segue into Tova, your perspective in terms of stepping outside of comfort zone?
Yeah. So, for those of you who don't know what living in an Orthodox life is, and I'm sure you've seen maybe like on Netflix, and it's literally what that is like. Like, you're very isolated. Everything is within the community. I went to an all girl school. Like, you never talk to boys. That wasn't, okay. I never ate at a McDonald's. I never had any fast food. Like, I only ate at kosher places. Like, I never had bacon, or I never had shellfish. Like, it just didn't exist. And then also, like, the community and the lifestyle. So everything is kind of homegrown. Like, you go to your Jewish doctor, you go to your Jewish accountant, you go to your Jewish lawyer, you have your Jewish babysitter. Like, so you're really very isolated, and it's a very insular community. There were a couple of things that were a very tough experience for me, of really outside my comfort zone, because I've never had any kind of role model of that. I had never had any kind of example or even understanding of some of these things, that I just had to navigate on my own. And it wasn't like I had a community of support that helped me, because I walked away from the community. So it was really challenging for me, and really going and not knowing. And a lot of things that, as I got older and learned and life experience, I only realized after the fact of what I didn't know. Because at the time, I didn't even know what I didn't know. I think the hardest part, and really outside of my comfort zone, was not having a support system. Not having a support system of just people to talk to that could identify. I was literally isolated on my own, leaving one very insular, closed minded community and out into this open public community. I didn't have a formal English education. Like, I wasn't in a secular school at all. And I went into college, and I had to learn how to read and write, like, grammatically correct, and how to cite things, like things I'd never had, and I had to teach myself that. So not only was I like trying to further my education, but I was really also giving myself for the first time a real education, that I never had before. I was also very naive and very trustworthy of everything. Like, in my mind, why would anyone lie to you or deceive you? Like, there's no reason for that. And how many people like really took advantage and kind of were manipulative. And again, I didn't know or realize until after the fact, and very naive walking into situations where I didn't understand the depth and understand human engagement, interaction, understand how people socialized. What I took to be and understand as human behavior was taken in different ways. So, for example, like, when you give someone your number, like, that says you're interested. And to me, it's like, oh no, just call me to ask me the question. Like, I was so naive. I was so young. I was so
Yeah.
dumb, so to speak. Where, again, social cues of when you say this or when you do that, those are indications to people that this is what you are. Clueless. Like, literally, like, and the thing though is, I spoke English. I was Americanized, in a lot of ways, but I didn't live an American lifestyle. And that, figuring that out, like, I only had a McDonald's for the first time when I was like in my 30s. Even when I left the religion, I just never ate there. It was just never something that I would even consider, because, like, why would I eat that? Like, I'd rather go make my own food or go to a very nice restaurant. So when my friends heard that, they're like, we're taking you.
So,
Also, yes, go ahead.
Tova, let's backtrack a bit just to get some context. What compelled you to explore leaving the community in the first place?
It didn't make sense to me from day one. From a very young age, I was like, that doesn't resonate with me. I just didn't find the values, or, and again, how Judaism is practiced in an Orthodox community is not something that I seen as a way of life and as the choice. It didn't make sense to me. And again, I still identify as Jewish, but I don't identify as an Orthodox Jew. The laws of Orthodox Jew is about, having a sense of community and a lifestyle. And that lifestyle from day one never added up. Like, does dressing a certain way make me a good person or not? Does, praying 3 times a day make me someone who's honest? Like, again, there were so many things. And again, there's a lot in the culture and the religion that the practice isn't the intention, it's how it's being used today. And that there was so much hypocrisy. There was so much contradiction. There was so much of the values placed on a very surface and exterior that just wasn't something I felt comfortable in. It wasn't something that I saw as a truth. I fought with my parents all the time. That doesn't make sense, but why? And I would get, why are you being so difficult? Just do what you're told. Stop making trouble.
And were there other members of the community or within your perhaps direct family who have had these thoughts or questions and just repressed them or didn't act on them? Or people like you who were brave enough to step outside?
So a lot of people don't talk about it. You don't want to admit it because then you kind of get like ousted and you get cut off, and it's really hard, especially as like a teenager or a child, when you rely on resources that you can't function, survive on your own. You get cut off from the family. So if you ever even have a conversation, they will disown you. And as a kid or as a teenager, you're not in a position to support yourself or take care of yourself, and you don't know what anyone else. So a lot of people only later in life, once they are an adult and could take care of themselves and support themselves, may leave, but not as a very young age. In my circles, that when I was growing up and I wasn't exposed to it, obviously there are different kinds of, Orthodox Jews all over the world, and everyone has their own personal story. But where I was exposed to, it was, you were looked down upon. There was something wrong with you, that if you ever had that feeling, or how could you think like that? And how dare you? And you are punished for it.
How do you
There was a
feel after
fear
you
of,
leave?
what's
Sorry.
that?
How do you feel after you leave the culture? And, you know, when you're in the culture, when you, regardless of culture or not, when you get in a habit of doing something for so long, leaving it, it always takes a toll on you, because you're like, okay, this is what I have. Me leaving it, I'm dumping whatever I have in this community, this habit I'm dumping, right? And so there's always evaluation goes behind, should I leave, should I not leave, what's the benefit of me leaving? Like, what was the, I guess, the moment that you realized I need to make that change in my life for the better?
It was when I was a young kid. Like, this happened yeah, definitely before, like when I was a teenager, of I'm not doing this when I'm older. When I'm going, and I knew right away, I was like, I'm going to go to college so I could support myself and I could live on my own. It was very, very clear at a very young age. I would say, like, right, between 10 and like 12, of
Yeah.
the lifestyle and seeing what happens. So you're old enough to have an awareness of what a life of adult life would look like and what my future could be. And I just remember very vividly of saying, I never want to live a life this way, ever. I treated this way. I don't want, there has to be more for me. I just felt it. There was something inside me that was telling me there's more for me in the world than this. What kind of future I would have. I saw that. I saw my mother. I saw friends and people that I knew get older and married and or just become adults. And I said in my head, I will never do this. I do not want to be this. But
So how
interesting
did
enough, like you said, like, certain things and you come with like, I left saying, I'm not doing this, but so much shaped the way I think, the way I act, the way I talk. And even though I told myself that I'm leaving this, there's still parts of it that's inside me that
Yep.
is hard to go against your
right?
nature, because it's so deep in my subconscious, and it's something that I wasn't actively understanding or knowing the impact of what that was. And only as I got older and more experienced, I was able to recognize that. So in my head, I kept saying, I'm not, living an Orthodox life, but yet a lot of things that I did and my behaviors were still influenced by that culture.
Of course, it's osmosis. It's, as you were saying, ingrained. I'm curious how this affected your relationship with your family.
It was a really bad relationship. So even when I was so-called Orthodox and living an Orthodox life at home, I had a very tough relationship with my parents. We disagreed on everything. I was very confrontational. I was very open about my feelings, my thoughts. Um, and there was always this contention between me and my parents. And there was a lot of, from them, the inability to connect with me. And it was more of, I'm the parent, so this is what you're going to do. That's how it translated a lot of ways.
I do not like this way of parenting.
And that's what they knew. And
Yeah.
my siblings were, I know they even say, like, they hated me. I was so disruptive. I was annoying. I was in their face. I was loud. I was screaming. I would cry. I throw tantrums. Like, as a kid, you don't even know, like, how to express yourself or have the words to use or the space for a safe place. And I just didn't know how to control myself in that kind of way or how to get what I needed. And more out of survival, a lot of these behaviors were a result of. I call like my fake relationship with my parents, where it's like, as you got more mature, it's like, stay out of their way, you know, just smile and wave, do what you're asked in a way that's okay, and don't really talk about it. When I made a decision to go to college, that's when my parents were like, we have no place for you in our home. You need to go. It's time for you to leave.
Wow.
And I had to do it all myself. I had to figure out how to get financial aid, how to pay for school, to apply for college, like all those things, like I did on my own. I babysat for a family who, they were more open-minded and more accepting, even though they were an Orthodox family. So during college, I babysat a lot for them. And like, she helped me out. The parents, like, they gave me room and board. They also helped me with my English and grammar and, thinking thoughts fully, like, out. And they provided, kind of more like a stepping stone before going out on my own. They had 6 boys. They traveled a lot, very wealthy, affluent family. And, I was happy to be there, have acceptance, a place to go. I was still like 18 years old at the time.
When you're speaking, I was just thinking like this phrase just keep lingering in my mind. Like you lose something, but you always will gain something in other
Mm-hmm.
aspects.
No, I'm very proud of the choices I made. I'm living the most authentic life for myself. I
Hmm.
also understand some people may be upset at my family. It maybe bothered them. And that's for them to sort through. Like, I can't apologize for being myself. I won't. I don't want to. Um, Over the years, as I became older and like became a parent and had more experience and able to, remove the emotional side, I was able to actually get very close to my sisters and other family members. I don't have a close relationship with my mom or my brothers. It's really non-existing, and I'm okay with that. I don't prevent my children from having a relationship with my family. I'm not against it. I'm also very respectful of them and their practice and what they value, and I'm not trying to disrupt that or have any issues. But also, I don't hide myself. I think in the beginning, I try to pretend and live, come home for holidays and pretend I was still religious when I wasn't, and in my own privacy, do what I wanted to do. And again, I was so young and naive and knew nothing. And I made tons of mistakes and had to learn from them.
This is very inspirational to hear because stepping outside of like a group and a culture is very, very difficult, especially you were growing up with this. So I can't imagine all the hardships, that you gone through during this process. And I felt like this is what makes you become stronger person as of now, Tova. Is yeah.
what I think has been the hardest struggle more so now was shifting out of a survival mode and a resilience mode, because I'm living a life for myself, and those ways don't serve me anymore. And I think that's kind of when I started, like, my path to purpose of like doing my journey inward to like, wait a second, who am I truly? What am I looking for out of life? What am I doing because that's really how I feel and I think, or what I just was in this bubble of that's all I knew and it made sense, but does that really serve me?
So, am I correct in assuming that in terms of the way you raise your children, it's much more of a secular lifestyle? Obviously, still being proud of your Judaism and your heritage. Like, how is that reconciled with, as you were saying, you don't stop them from having relationships with members of your family?
Yeah, absolutely. So we practice a Jewish culture. I did send my kids to Hebrew school to have some Jewish education when they were younger. I do celebrate all the holidays. Like I said, I'm close to my sisters. So when they were young and even now, we'd go and participate in a lot of the Jewish celebrations and culture. I also do it in my own home. I encourage it. I want my kids to have an identity, understand where they're from. And I also explain to them when they're young, there are all kinds of Jews, and you have to make a path that's most comfortable, that makes sense for you. You're going to see a variety, and that's anything in the world of what people identify and how they identify. And for you, it's your choice. If you decide that you identify as another, that's also okay. That's your journey, that's your path. But at the same time, me as someone who identifies as Jewish, I want to give them that framework and culture of what that is, and how they choose and decide to move forward. That's their choice to make.
That's so wonderful in terms of allowing them and granting them the freedom that you didn't have, but yet you were brave enough to break out of those constrictions and really take a leap of faith for yourself. And that's the most important thing, I think, in terms of really believing in yourself as you're passing that along to your children and granting them that freedom to explore what's out there, but yet still celebrating where they come from. And that's a very difficult thing to do, especially nowadays where there's perhaps so many options and so many paths. Younger generation, it just seems like, I think once you're presented with too many options, it's almost paralyzing. And it's easier to fall back to what your parents dictated to you because it's just safer and easier. In terms of your journey of self-discovery, tell us about a situation where you broke outside of the comfort zone.
I think I'd gone through like a personality shift when I was a kid versus me now. When I was a kid, I was very shy. I was very timid, not wanted to be approached by strangers or not want to talk to strangers and don't never take initiatives. And versus me now, like not sure what happened. The way how I am right now is like I like to try things. And if I'm thinking about something and I'm really aiming or really like that idea, I'm going to take an action immediately.
Was there something in your childhood that shaped how you were, in those years? Was your parents, how they treated you, or is there something that you can look back and say, the reason why I was this way was?
No, not at all, Tova. And that's being very, very frank.
Really?
Yeah. That's why I find it miraculous.
I find that fascinating.
I find it very fascinating that like when I was a kid, my family was very like rigid family, and then they want you to be like don't want you to be the kid that's so loud, so outspoken. They just want you to do what they wanted you to do. So that's why, and I think maybe that forced me into that personality that I wasn't even know that I became like myself today.
I get that.
After I moved to US, and they think that kind of broke out of me. Still till this day, I can't identify what changed in me. that makes me
Mm-hmm.
the me today. Right now, I am more of an extrovert. I like to speak about my thoughts, my ideas. I am more outspoken, and I am not afraid of talking to strangers. I'm not afraid of like raising my hand. I'm no
Mm-hmm.
longer afraid of things rather than when I was a kid, I will always be worrying. I also be concerned, like if I come up or if I stand up, if I talk, people gonna look at me a certain way and things like that. I think I broke that chain off somehow in my growth path from high school to college. I think the biggest transition is in college years. I think college years really make me feel very empowered and
Mm-hmm.
confident as a woman and as Asian women. I think a few years ago, I got very interested in like the creative space because I think the finance job was just not satisfying my needs. And that's an aspect that I never thought I would be um, good at or ever thought. Like when I was in college, I think I'm just, okay, I'm going to be a finance person. And when you think about finance, it's more of a to the boring side. When that
Yes.
idea of me trying to be more creative and putting myself out there and becoming like beauty influencer and things like that, I think that was a very big step outside of my comfort zone. And I'm not sure what stirs behind my drive. I just literally had this idea, okay, I can have a camera. I bought a camera. I can just film myself and I film myself and I edit it and I upload it, share it with the world. At certain moments, I would take very bold steps in my decision to do something. And that's also reflected in my recent years career move from finance to tech. Like typically when you jump from finance to tech, it's usually you jumping from like investment side or finance team from the in the finance and you jump over
Mhm.
to the finance teams in tech. So that's an easy transition. It's never something like you doing it with like a trading and then you jump into
Mm-hmm.
like a tech client facing role. So it was a very drastic change. It's just like something, I don't know, like a sixth sense. I always have that like feeling inside
Mhm.
of me, like a sixth sense that tells me, hey, it's time for you to make a move. I'm not sure why I need to make a move, but it just tells me, it stirs me inside of me that I need to make a
Mm-hmm.
move. And this is how we're gonna do it.
I did have a question. At that stage when you were more introverted, was that very your true self at that time, or you felt like you were someone else? And now that you're your true self, or was that very true to you at that point?
I think that's also a true self of me, the introvert side of me. It's
Mm-hmm.
also me, but not entirely me. The way how I see it is like peeling an onion. Maybe the outside layer of Cleo was under family's environment, very introverted, afraid to speak up because she's afraid if she speak up, she's gonna get scolded, right? I think that's what's pressing my
Mm-hmm.
nature. Maybe in a different family setting, I will be like the current me now, but versus in a different family setting, I was a very introverted, very scared of raising hand, or very scared of speaking up because I also had a geography change. The family influence around me is less, and slowly, and the interaction that I have with my college friend, high school friend were so different from like my Asian influence, right? So I think that kind of broke me out of what's being locked me down. So I think the introvert side, I still have that introvert side, but it was more revealed as outsider. But the inside me, it's more the current me now. Does that make sense? I feel like
Got it.
it's
Yeah,
I
yeah.
call it
So
like a peeling onion.
if I'm understanding correct, if you continue to live in China, so you think you would still be this person you are today, or you'd still be that introvert?
I think I would still be that introvert.
Oh yeah.
Do you
Yeah.
think perhaps you came to the US, you said for high school, so 13, 14, I
Yeah.
guess, was the age? You had spent the bulk of your formative years abroad. Do you think that it's also in terms of being much more extroverted and being much more of an independent thinker? It's kind of like a fuck you to all of those stereotypes that perhaps the United States culture has towards Asian women?
I think a very small percentage of that. It's more of this weird confidence of me. Like I'm so secure of myself. I know what I'm capable of. And I don't care. Like regardless of race, I can be anybody. But I'm just
Mhm.
gonna be very confident of myself.
So here's another question. I love that question, Jenny, because it makes me think, based on our appearance, a lot of people put these ideas or like these stereotypes on us. So even you having this feeling, but just by your looks, and you enter a room or a situation, do you feel like you have to fight that stereotype? Or
Yeah, in finance, you definitely do. You need
Mhm,
to fight for like your own place, a place of voice for
mhm.
yourself. However, when I was in finance, like in the previous episodes, I talk about this white colleague that felt he has very privileged. I didn't feel like I'm below them. I didn't feel
Mhm.
like because I'm Asian and because I'm Asian women that I'm less than you.
I don't think you felt that, but were you treated that way, right? Not how you feel, how other people perceive you.
Not so much at professional workplaces. But that might be because I wasn't like higher enough in the ranking to feel that.
Mhm.
Because when you move up the ladder to become senior person, there is going to be a race aspect to this.
I find it so fascinating, like everyone's like journey of what shapes our choices and who we
Yeah,
are, and what of it is our own selves, and what of it is outside influences and society and culture. It's like, are we truly free and our own selves, or there are parts of us that are shaped by outsiders or outside factors? Like a huge
yeah,
part of my existence is shaped by, you know, how I was raised, my religion, my culture. And even though I don't live in it, I think there's still parts of it that are still inside me that I'm uncovering.
I agree. And I think Tova, just kind of like when you're speaking about this, something came to my mind that I thought because I was raised in. I told you I was raised in a very pressured family that they never they will never say good job. They will never say, oh, you did so great. Even you get a perfect score, right? They'd be like, oh, okay, do better next time. What to do better next time? It's a perfect score already. Can you just say good job and say something like that? Say something that's my family say it. The way how they think of this is like, why am I praising you? What's
Yes.
the problem with praising you? That's my question
Mhm.
back to them. Like now I can speak about this back to them, but when I was a kid, I will never be able to say, why can't you praise me? Like that's not even like a question. This is where the weird elements comes in is because I get suppressed so much by my family member that I never get a good job, a well done response from them. I don't know, like it kind of became the opposite effect of me. Like I'm gonna become so confident in what I'm doing and I'm gonna show you. Even with your not so great, like a family culture, I can still be as good as I can.
Well, it's like an act of compensation, right? Like you're not getting it from your family, so you have to tap from within.
Yes, I think so. Jenny, that's very well put statement. Like that's exactly. I didn't get anything from the external sources, the external
Mhm.
environments. So,
Mhm.
where is that gonna get from? Myself, my inner drives.
And that's how you validate yourself, through yourself, not other people. Like you have to validate. I mean, it took me a long time to understand that, a really long time, and lots of errors and mistakes and bad relationships or focusing on the wrong things because I didn't understand that.
I think for me, it's a very similar situation, but I'm one of those people, and I've talked about this in previous podcasts. I've never felt accepted anywhere. And it wasn't like I had some sort of like social deficiency or like I was the weird kid in the class. I think very similar to you, but like questioned it. Like, why?
Mhm.
Why are some people bullied and some people not? And why is Jane Doe trying to so hard to be accepted at her own expense? And I always question these things. I think, and also being compounded by coming from an Asian family, very similar to yours, where you're just never complimented on it. It's just never good enough. Why can't you be like Tova? Why can't you be like Cleo? Like, you're not good enough. You're always being like compared. I've developed this tendency to question things even more. Tova and I have talked about this, always looking under the hood, like everything, and pointing things out, and really trusting your gut, and not only believing in yourself and the best of intentions, but I've fallen into this tendency to try to find other people who think along the same lines, and they are out there. The problem is most people don't have the courage and self-confidence to express these feelings. And it's like finding a needle in a haystack in terms of finding that very small, very select group of people who are like, you know what? You're right. And I am questioning these things. And this is fucked up. And this is not, I refuse to be treated like this. I refuse to treat others like this. And developing and being proud of your own morals and values, and constantly sticking up for yourself and people around you. And that's the tendency that I have found myself in, I think, because of all of these other factors that I just described.
I just really love this episode so much because I think each one of us have our own story, own experience, yet at the same time, each of us, despite everything that was against us, we actually listened to our inner voice. We paused and we asked the right questions, and therefore we did what was best for us. And again, against all odds, to be successful and fight against nature and everything that we have that supports us just says so much, and it's so powerful to me.
It's very empowering.
It is, absolutely. And I feel very privileged to have found these two other women who think very much along the same lines. To those people out there who are listening to this episode and questioning themselves and not having that courage to take chances, grab the bull by the horns, question things, take the path of least resistance, as I mentioned at the beginning of this podcast, words of advice?
I always think you have a lot of influence, a lot of voices outside of you, but you always know what's the best thing for yourself in your gut. So sometimes, most of the times, trust your gut.
Thank you both for sharing your stories with me today. I just am so empowered.
Likewise. And until next time.
Until next time.
Thanks for listening.